What would you do if your family was destroyed by betrayal? For Shakuni, the answer was clear revenge. But in his quest to bring down the mighty Kuru dynasty, he didn't just seek justice, he unleashed chaos. Shakuni's story is one of vengeance, manipulation, and ambition, making him one of the most controversial figures in the Mahabharata. In our last video, we explored Kunti's resilience, her ability to guide the Pandavas with wisdom and strength. But where Kunti shaped the Pandavas, Shakuni fueled the Kauravas. His actions didn't just drive the rivalry, they set the stage for the Kurukshetra war. Let's uncover how this master strategist became a central figure in this epic tale. Shakuni wasn't just a passive observer in the Kuru court. He was the prince of Gandhara and brother to Gandhari, who became Dhritarashtra's queen. At first glance, Shakuni might seem like a doting uncle to Duryodhana, but his motivations ran much deeper. Shakuni harbored a deep grudge against the Kuru dynasty. This hatred stemmed from a personal tragedy, the imprisonment and starvation of his family by the Kurus. As the story goes, his father and brothers were captured and slowly killed by being denied food. Shakuni vowed to destroy the dynasty that had inflicted such suffering on his family. But Shakuni wasn't a warrior. He didn't fight with weapons. Instead, he wielded manipulation and deceit as his tools. He became Duryodhana's advisor, whispering strategies and sowing seeds of hatred. His actions transformed a family rivalry into an all out war. Now, here is what makes Shakuni so fascinating. On one hand, he is a villain, a man who used cunning to manipulate people and destroy lives. On the other hand, he is a tragic figure. His schemes were driven by a personal sense of justice, a desire to avenge the wrongs done to his family. This duality is what makes him one of the most complex characters in the Mahabharata. Shakuni's mastery of dice games and his ability to manipulate outcomes became legendary. He wasn't just playing games, he was playing people, bending situations to his will. But his cunning came at a cost. In his quest for revenge, he sacrificed morality, ethics, and eventually even the well being of those he claimed to support. So, who was Shakuni? Was he a hero for his family or a villain for the Kurus? The truth lies somewhere in between. As we journey through his story, we'll explore the motives behind his actions, the brilliance of his strategies, and the devastating consequences of his revenge. From the game of dice that humiliated the Pandavas to his role in the Kurukshetra war, Shakuni's influence shaped some of the most pivotal moments in the Mahabharata. His story isn't just about revenge, it's about the fine line between justice and destruction. Shakuni's life is a powerful reminder of how ambition and vengeance can shape destinies, for better or worse. In the next chapter, we will dive into his early life and the personal tragedy that turned him into the mastermind we know today. Every villain has a story, and Shakuni's is no different. But what makes his story unique is that it begins not with ambition, but with pain, betrayal, and a vow for revenge. To understand Shakuni, the master manipulator of the Mahabharata, we need to go back to where it all began, to his early life in Gandhara and the tragedy that shaped his destiny. Shakuni was born as a prince of Gandhara, a prosperous kingdom known for its culture and wisdom. His father, King Subala, ruled Gandhara with fairness, and Shakuni grew up surrounded by the luxuries of royal life. As the youngest of many siblings, Shakuni was intelligent, sharp, and deeply devoted to his family. He shared a special bond with his sister Gandhari. Gandhara wasn't just Shakuni's home, it was a symbol of pride for its people. The royal family was deeply respected, and Shakuni was being groomed to play an important role in the future. Little did anyone know that this peaceful life would soon be shattered. Everything changed when Bhishma, the elder of the Kuru dynasty, came to Gandhara to arrange a marriage between Gandhari and Dhritarashtra, the blind prince of Hastinapur. While the alliance was prestigious, it wasn't without its challenges. Gandhari, known for her piety and loyalty, chose to blindfold herself for life as a gesture of solidarity with her husband. For Gandhara, this marriage was supposed to strengthen ties with the powerful Kuru dynasty. But behind the scenes, it set the stage for a tragedy that would change Shakuni forever. After Gandhari's marriage, tension grew between Gandhara and Hastinapur. It is said that the Kuru dynasty, fearing Gandhara's influence, devised a cruel plan. Shakuni's family, including his father and brothers, were imprisoned by the Kurus. They were kept in captivity and given only a single grain of rice and a single sip of water each day. Can you imagine the suffering? Day by day, Shakuni watched his father and brothers grow weaker. The once proud royal family of Gandhara was being destroyed not by war but by starvation. It's said that before his death, King Subala chose Shakuni to survive and avenge their family. He instructed Shakuni to eat the meager rations so he could stay alive and fulfill his mission. Shakuni's survival wasn't just an act of endurance, it was the beginning of a burning hatred for the Kuru dynasty. The loss of his family left a permanent scar on his heart. But instead of succumbing to despair, Shakuni transformed his grief into a vow to destroy the Kurus from within. To do this, Shakuni needed a strategy. He realized that he couldn't defeat the Kurus on the battlefield, but he could bring them down through cunning and manipulation. And this is where the seeds of the master manipulator were sown. Shakuni didn't just inherit his father's wisdom, he also inherited his father's bones. Quite literally, it's said that the dice Shakuni used to play with were made from his father's bones. These dice weren't ordinary, they would always roll in Shakuni's favor. With this tool, he honed his skills in deception and strategy, preparing himself for the battle side, not with swords, but with cunning. Shakuni eventually moved to Hastinapur, where he became a trusted advisor to his nephew Duryodhana. To the Kuru court, he appeared as a loyal uncle, but deep down, every action he took was guided by his vow for revenge. He played on Duryodhana's insecurities, fueling his hatred for the Pandavas and planting the seeds for the Great War. So, what drove Shakuni? Was it pure hatred? Was it loyalty to his family? Or was it the twisted sense of justice he sought for the suffering of Gandhara? Shakuni's story isn't black and white. He wasn't just a villain. He was a man shaped by pain, loss, and a desire to protect his family's honor, even if it meant destroying another. Shakuni's early life shows us how pain can transform a person, turning them into something unrecognizable. In the next chapter, we will see how Shakuni's strategies unfolded in Hastinapur, setting the stage for the infamous game of dice and the exile of the Pandavas. Stay with us as we uncover the mind of this master manipulator. Imagine walking into the most powerful kingdom of your time, not as an outsider, but as a family. Yet, your goal isn't to build it up, it's to bring it down from within. This was Shakuni's reality when he entered Hastinapur. Let's explore how he used manipulation, strategy, and a deep understanding of human weaknesses to shape the events of the Mahabharata. Shakuni arrived in Hastinapur as Gandhari's brother and the maternal uncle of the Kauravas. Outwardly, he played the role of a loyal family member, someone invested in the success of the Kuru dynasty. But beneath this facade, Shakuni was a man on a mission to avenge the suffering of his family and destroy the Kurus. His position in Hastinapur was unique. As Gandhari's brother, he had unquestioned access to the royal family. As Duryodhana's uncle, he became a trusted confidant. But Shakuni wasn't just a relative. He was a strategist who knew how to read people and exploit their weaknesses. Shakuni's first major move in Hastinapur was establishing himself as Duryodhana's advisor. He quickly recognized Duryodhana's insecurities, his jealousy of the Pandavas, his hunger for power, and his need for validation. And Shakuni used this knowledge to his advantage. He didn't just advise Duryodhana, he fueled his ambitions. He encouraged Duryodhana to see the Pandavas as threats, not just brothers. Under Shakuni's influence, Duryodhana's natural envy turned into a burning hatred. Shakuni wasn't just guiding Duryodhana, he was molding him into a weapon for his revenge. The rivalry between the Kauravas and the Pandavas was always simmering. The Pandavas were favored by the elders, beloved by the people, and seen as the natural heirs to Hastinapur. For Duryodhana, this was unbearable. Shakuni amplified these feelings, constantly pointing out the differences in how the two groups were treated. He orchestrated incidents to widen the divide. Remember the poisoning of Bhima? Shakuni played a role in encouraging Duryodhana to take such drastic steps. He wasn't just creating tension, he was planting seeds of discord that would grow into full-blown conflict. But Shakuni's genius didn't stop with Duryodhana. He also targeted Dhritarashtra, the blind king of Hastinapur. Dhritarashtra's love for his son was both his strength and his weakness. Shakuni used this to manipulate the king into making decisions that favored Duryodhana, even when they were unjust. Take the decision to send the Pandavas to Varnavata, where they were nearly killed in the Lakshagriha fire. This plan had Shakuni's fingerprints all over it. He played on Dhritarashtra's fears, convincing him that sending the Pandavas away was the best way to protect Duryodhana's position. Shakuni's ability to manipulate Dhritarashtra came from understanding the king's vulnerabilities, his blindness, his dependence on advisors, and his emotional attachment to Duryodhana. Shakuni was a master at playing on these weaknesses to achieve his own end. What's fascinating about Shakuni is that he didn't rush. His strategies were part of a long game. He knew that outright confrontation wouldn't work. So he focused on creating cracks, small conflicts, tiny injustices that would eventually escalate. And all the while, he maintained his image as a loyal uncle and advisor. Shakuni's actions in Hastinapur tell us a lot about his character. He wasn't just a manipulator, he was a strategist who understood the power of perception, relationships, and influence. He knew that wars aren't just fought on battlefields, they are fought in hearts and minds. And in Hastinapur, Shakuni was winning that war. But his brilliance was also his downfall. By deepening the rivalry and manipulating those around him, he set the stage for a conflict that will ultimately destroy everything, including himself. Shakuni's time in Hastinapur was just the beginning. In the next chapter, we will explore how his strategies culminated in the infamous game of dice, a turning point in the Mahabharata. Stay with us as we unravel the mind of the man who changed the course of history with the roll of a dice. They say life is a gamble, but what if the stakes were an entire kingdom and the players were family? The infamous game of dice, orchestrated by Shakuni, wasn't just a game. It was a masterstroke of deceit that changed the Mahabharata forever. Let's dive into how Shakuni used strategy and manipulation to alter the course of history. The stage for the game of dice wasn't set overnight. Shakuni had spent years fueling Duryodhana's jealousy and ambition. The Pandavas were thriving in Indraprastha, their newly built kingdom, and their success only deepened Duryodhana's hatred. To Duryodhana, their wealth and power were unbearable, and Shakuni saw an opportunity, a way to strike at the Pandavas without lifting a single weapon. Shakuni suggested a game of dice to Duryodhana. His plan was simple yet brilliant. Challenge Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, who had a known weakness for gambling. Shakuni knew that Yudhishthira, bound by dharma, would never refuse a challenge, especially one presented as a friendly game. Now here is where Shakuni's genius truly shines. The dice he used weren't ordinary. They were made of his father's bones and were enchanted to obey his wills. In other words, every roll of dice was predetermined. It wasn't just a game, it was a trap, one that Yudhishthira didn't even realize he was walking into. With the loaded dice in hand, Shakuni took control of the game. Every roll, every move was calculated to lead the Pandavas toward ruin, and the stakes kept getting higher. At first, Yudhishthira wagered small items, wealth, jewelry, livestock, but as he kept losing, the stakes grew higher. Shakuni skillfully provoked him to bet more, using Duryodhana's taunts and the allure of winning back his losses. Soon Yudhishthira began wagering land, palaces, and eventually his entire kingdom. Shakuni didn't stop there. He pushed Yudhishthira to wager his brothers. One by one, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva were lost in the game, and then came the final devastating blow. Yudhishthira wagered Draupadi, the queen of the Pandavas, and lost her too. What followed was one of the darkest moments in the Mahabharata. Draupadi, the queen of Indraprastha, was dragged into the Kuru court, humiliated in front of the elders and royals. Duryodhana's actions crossed every line, but it was Shakuni who had set the stage for this atrocity. Draupadi's humiliation wasn't just a personal attack, it was a moral failure for the entire Kuru dynasty. This moment planted the seeds of war, turning the Pandavas' humiliation into a vow of revenge. For Shakuni, the game of dice was a victory, but it was a short lived one. He succeeded in exiling the Pandavas and taking control of their kingdom. But in doing so, he set the stage for the Kurukshetra war. Shakuni's plan relied on manipulation and deceit, but he underestimated the resilience and unity of the Pandavas. By orchestrating the game of dice, Shakuni had hoped to destroy the Pandavas' power. Instead, he only strengthened their resolve. The humiliation they suffered became the driving force behind their return and eventual victory. Shakuni's role in the dice game shows us that power of strategy and manipulation, but it also highlights its limits. His cunning gave him temporary success, but it couldn't outlast the Pandavas' determination and dharma. The game of dice was a turning point, not just for the Mahabharata, but for Shakuni himself. Shakuni's strategies didn't end with the game of dice. In the next chapter, we will explore his role in the Kurukshetra war, where his cunning faced its ultimate test. The Kurukshetra war wasn't just fought with weapons, it was a battle of wits, strategy, and willpower. And when it came to strategy, no one played the game quite like Shakuni. But even the greatest manipulators have their limits. Let's unravel how Shakuni's plans unfolded during the war and how they ultimately led to his downfall. Shakuni was more than just Duryodhana's uncle, he was his most trusted advisor during the war. While Duryodhana relied on brute strength and Bhishma focused on honor, Shakuni brought something different to the table: cunningness. He was the one who pushed the Kauravas to use every trick, every alliance, and every loophole to gain an edge over the Pandavas. From the very start of the war, Shakuni's strategies revolved around exploiting the Pandavas. He knew their strengths: Yudhishthira's adherence to Dharma, Arjuna's skill, Bhima's strength, but he also understood their weaknesses. Shakuni wanted to turn those weaknesses into opportunities for the Kauravas. One of Shakuni's major contributions to war was in building alliances for the Kauravas. He helped secure the support of warriors like Karna and Shalya, both of whom played critical roles in the battlefield. While Karna was motivated by loyalty to Duryodhana, Shalya was manipulated into joining the Kaurava side. Shakuni's ability to twist situations to the Kaurava's advantage was unmatched, but his strategies didn't stop there. Shakuni was behind many of the more underhanded tactics used in the war. For example, he encouraged Duryodhana to attack Abhimanyu unfairly, breaking the rules of the war to kill the young warrior. These movements, though tactically successful, only added to the Kauravas' growing list of moral failures. Shakuni also played a key role in keeping Duryodhana's moral high. The war was grueling, and as the days passed, the Kauravas began to lose some of their strongest warriors. Bhishma fell, Drona fell, Karna fell. Each loss was a devastating blow to Duryodhana, but Shakuni remained a constant presence, pushing him to keep fighting. He would remind Duryodhana of the stakes, the throne, the kingdom, the legacy, but in his attempts to motivate Duryodhana, Shakuni often failed to see the bigger picture. His advice became increasingly desperate, relying more on deceit and less on sound strategy. And this shift ultimately weakened the Kauravas. While Shakuni's cunning helped the Kauravas in the short term, it couldn't sustain them in the long run. His reliance on manipulation and unfair tactics created cracks in the Kauravas' camp. Allies like Shalya fought half-heartedly, knowing they had been deceived. Karna, despite his loyalty, often clashed with Duryodhana and Shakuni over their decisions. More importantly, Shakuni underestimated the Pandavas' resilience and Krishna's guidance. Every time the Kauravas bent the rules, Krishna found a way to turn it into a moral victory for the Pandavas. Shakuni's strategies, brilliant as they were, couldn't overcome the unity and purpose of the Pandavas. Shakuni fought in the war as well, though his strength lay more in his mind than in combat. On the 18th day of the Kurukshetra war, his time finally came. Sahadeva, the youngest Pandava, had vowed to kill Shakuni for his role in their suffering, and he did exactly that. Sahadeva confronted Shakuni and defeated him, bringing an end to the master manipulator. Shakuni's role in the Kurukshetra war is a testament to his cunning and strategic brilliance, but it's also a cautionary tale. His focus on deceit and short term victories blinded him to the long term consequences of his actions. In the end, his strategies didn't just fail, they ensured the destruction of the very family he claimed to support. Through Shakuni, the Mahabharata teaches us an important lesson. Cunning and manipulation can win battles, but they cannot win wars. Shakuni's role in the war may have ended, but his legacy lives on as a symbol of both brilliance and moral failure. In the next chapter, we'll explore his final moments and the legacy he left behind. Stay with us as we close the book on one of the Mahabharata's most complex characters. Every grand plan, no matter how clever, has its breaking point. For Shakuni, the master manipulator of the Mahabharata, his downfall came not from his enemy's strength, but from the very cunning he relied upon. His death marked the end of a life filled with schemes, but his legacy that lives on in the lessons we draw from his story. Shakuni's journey through the Mahabharata was defined by his cunning and unrelenting pursuit of revenge. But even the sharpest mind couldn't prevent the inevitable. By the 18th day of the Kurukshetra war, the Kaurava side was in shambles. Bhishma, Drona, Karna, all their greatest warriors had fallen, and Shakuni, he was next. Sahadeva, the youngest of the Pandavas, had sworn to kill Shakuni for all the suffering he had caused their family. This wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was justice for the years of deceit, the humiliation of Draupadi, and the countless lives lost because of Shakuni's schemes. When Sahadeva finally confronted him, Shakuni, despite his cleverness, had no escape. He met his end on the battlefield, a stark reminder that no amount of manipulation can shield you from the consequences of your actions. Shakuni's death wasn't just the end of a life. It was the conclusion of his lifelong vendetta against the Kuru dynasty. Ironically, the very family he sought to avenge, his own had long since perished. His revenge cost him everything, and in the end, even the Kuru dynasty worked so hard to destroy was obliterated. His victory was a hollow one. So, what we can learn from Shakuni's life? First and foremost, Shakuni teaches us that intelligence and cunning can be powerful tools, but they are no substitute for righteousness. His strategies were brilliant, his manipulation unparalleled, but his motives, driven by revenge, were his downfall. Another key lesson is about the consequences of deceit. Shakuni's entire life was built on lies. His manipulation of Duryodhana, his role in the game of dice, his tactics during the war, they all succeeded in the short term, but each victory only brought him closer to total destruction. And then there is the lesson of revenge. Shakuni's hatred for the Kuru dynasty was understandable. After all, his family suffered greatly at their hand. But his inability to move beyond that hatred consumed him. His quest for vengeance didn't just destroy the Kuru dynasty, it destroyed him too. The Mahabharata reminds us time and again that revenge is a fire that burns everything it touches. But let's not forget Shakuni's impact on the story. His actions set the wheels of the Mahabharata in motion. Without Shakuni, there will be no game of dice, no exile to the Pandavas, and perhaps no Kurukshetra war. His role is a testament to the power of strategy, even when used for the wrong reasons. Of all the people Shakuni influenced, none were more important than Duryodhana. Shakuni didn't just advise Duryodhana, he shaped him. He fueled his insecurities, deepened his hatred for the Pandavas, and turned his ambition into an obsession. Duryodhana was a torchbearer of Shakuni's plans, and in many ways his downfall was tied to Shakuni's. But Duryodhana's story is more than just the continuation of Shakuni's schemes. It's a tale of pride, loyalty, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. Where Shakuni relied on cunning, Duryodhana relied on force. And while both sought power, their approaches and their fates were very different. As we say goodbye to Shakuni, we open the door to Duryodhana's story. What happens when ambition becomes a man's guiding force? What lessons can we learn from the man who defied the Pandavas to bitter end? Stay tuned as we uncover the next chapter in the Mahabharata.